Hi, welcome to Conversations with Gen Z, and I have Nina with me.
Hey.
And we are going to talk a little bit about pros for public high school and the
Yeah.
experience, and the cons for public high school in your personal experience.
Okay, so I would say for high school, it was nice seeing my friends every day. It was nice being just constantly busy with events. I was playing for my JV high school team for soccer, and so that was really fun. But the cons were, I didn't have time. I got to school at 7:30, came home at like 3, and after that I would do 2 to 3 hours of homework every single day. I would have soccer practice after school and then come home at like 6, do 2 to 3 hours of homework, eat, and go to bed. So it was like this schedule, and I barely had any time for friends, for going to youth group, church, because I was still doing soccer. And so just, I think my priorities weren't quite right. I just didn't have time for anything.
Okay. So you would say the pros were you got to see your friends on a daily basis. What was the other one?
Just the activities, but I would also say there were good teachers. I was challenged in my biology class. I do remember that, but there were also bad teachers. So there are kids who thrive and they want to learn. Like my friends all were great students, extremely academic, and just like me, they wanted to learn. They wanted to achieve, to get good grades, whatever it was. But there are also kids who just don't care, and so you're in the mix of that, and it's discouraging because if the teacher has to slow down for the kids who just don't care, there are limitations to what you can learn. You can go at a slower pace. You just can't go on your own pace. You can't learn what you want to learn. It's not always fun writing essays, doing homework, but there are definitely pros and cons to high school, homeschool.
Okay, so it sounds like you've had the whole experience. You did public school in the beginning. You homeschooled for probably the majority of your education.
Yes.
You were then enrolled in private school for a short period, back to homeschooling
Yes.
in a classical co-op, and then back into the public high school in which you were challenged, and God blessed you with a great friend group, so it wasn't very difficult for you, would you say? Or was it? Because a lot of times people will look at high school, and when they think of public high school, their mind just thinks of all the negative things you can possibly think of. But you would say for your personal experience, that was not the case? Or was it, but it just wasn't a part of your immediate situation?
Well, I think what happened in terms of friends and just, all the negatives, whether there's, when people think of high school, whether it's through, homeschoolers thinking of going into high school, all the negatives, yes, it's there, but I think what happened is, my first week of high school, I didn't know anyone. I wasn't in junior high going up to high school, and so it was lonely for the first 2 weeks. I didn't know anyone, so that was extremely difficult for me because I love people. I can talk. I can make friends. That hasn't ever really been an issue. But, I had to pray for friends, for godly young friends who kind of had the same values and things that I would want for my education, my faith. And so, later on, God blessed me with these 2 girls. And so I think because I hung out with such a small group, I just stayed away. I used my discernment against, kids who just weren't godly, they were worldly or whatever it was. But it's part of high school, but I just think it strengthened my faith, just having to be set apart from, all the kids there and being a light and working hard and using my gifts and trying to glorify God in my actions through my work and school and sport.
So what would you say is your least favorite thing about homeschooling?
This is hard because I don't really have a least favorite thing about homeschooling. Like I said before, I've gone to public school, but I was drawn back to homeschooling. And so, yes, there are pros and cons, but there are ways to substitute and find different ways to combat these cons.
What are some cons? If any?
People, I think before I've said friends, social events, but I was always busy. I think the only reason that I went to public high school was just for a change of pace. But at least now, like for friends and social things like that. I mean, yes, you don't see your
So are
friends
you
every
saying
day.
social things are the con? Because I want people as they're making, because some people may be watching this and they're like just doing their research on homeschooling. I want them to hear the real deal. Like, and you're saying, I think I hear you saying there are no cons. Is that for you? There are social cons. Is that what you're saying? I just wanted to be clear. From your perspective, is there any con in homeschooling? Although you love homeschooling, it sounds like it. Is there anything that parents need to be, or kids need to be aware of when you homeschool?
Yes. I mean, it's different from public education. I mean, you have a completely different schedule. You don't see your friends every day. That's one thing that, I mean, it's nice, but I don't need it. The socializing, you supplement that with sports, activities, going to church. At least that's what I do. In 8th grade, I think I just wanted to try to challenge myself, like have a different challenge. But it really depends on what you want. I would say for cons, I don't really have many, if any.
I think that's fair, because what I hear you saying is, Mrs. Brown, I have homeschooled, I've been in private school, I've been in public school, and when I look at these three types of ways of being educated, I look at homeschool and I just see the benefits far outweigh any of the possible cons. Therefore, I don't even see them as cons, because anything that could be a con, you can deal with it. You can adjust. You can. And so the theme I've seen as I've been talking to different kids, teenagers who have homeschooled, the biggest thing that I've heard thus far is loneliness, friendships, socializing. It's all pertaining to interaction with others. And so I kind of heard that in your answer, but it sounded as though you were saying, but that can be dealt with, right? Is that what you were saying?
I just know that I have a friend who is in high school, and she's my best friend, and I always tell her, oh, you should be homeschooled. She loves learning, and it's just the teachers, the quality of education. It's not what she could be like. She could continue to push herself, and she's like, oh, well, I wouldn't want to homeschool because I would miss my friends, I would miss the social stuff. But I always tell her, like, yes, that's true, but what I do is, I play sports, I go to church, I do different activities, I try to hang out with my homeschooling friends, even my friends that are in school, as much as I can. You just have more freedom and flexibility to do those things, and so it's not really an issue for me, but I mean, it may be an issue to others. I'm not sure.
So what it sounds like is, it can be an issue if you allow it to be an issue.
Yes.
It can be easily resolved if you are intentional about seeing your friends on the weekend, hanging out, doing different things. You have to make it happen.
You have to put in the effort.
Yeah, you have to. You have to actually put in an effort, because you're not going to be naturally seeing them on a daily basis. So even though that can be a challenge for many homeschoolers, it's also a challenge that can be resolved quite easily if you are intentional.
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, what would you say is the best thing? I mean, you've said a lot of good things already, but I want to make it a little more concise.
Yes.
Give me the top 3 good things about homeschooling.
Okay. For me, it would be like the freedom, the flexibility, and just the challenge. So homeschooling can be different for different people. I mean, for me, I'm driven. I want to push myself and receive the best education I can. I love learning, but the freedom of homeschooling, I think that's the best thing of it. You can have the flexibility to go one day to a museum to pursue different types of learning. For me, I am dual enrolled in my community college, and so I'm getting credits done. I can pursue my different interests. Like, I can manage school on top of sports, and and still have a life. I think that's the biggest thing for me, because if I had gone the traditional route, I wouldn't have time for as many things that I'm doing now, to read, to work on my relationship with God, to go to church, to youth group. And so now I can really manage my time. I can create my own schedule.
Yeah. So it sounds like you're getting a very good education.
Yes.
Sometimes people, I didn't know this because of my experience with homeschool, but some people feel like homeschooling could be too easy.
Yeah.
You know, you just get away with doing nothing.
Mm-hmm.
I can't relate whatsoever, because what we do is extremely rigorous. I also have a dual enrolled, child in high school and in college at the same time. So I can't relate, but that's also something that can be dealt with as well.
Yes. And I think that, like, it just depends on the student. It depends on just if you are driven and you want to challenge yourself and push yourself, or, you could take like a traditional, you could go textbook, you could like the public school route, but just at home. And I think, yes, there are few who, okay, maybe take the easy route. They can make homeschooling super easy, but there are also those who challenge themselves and push themselves, and end up, in the end, they have a more well-rounded education, because they aren't doing busy work. They aren't constantly bombarded with homework. I mean,
Right.
It's just a different route, and it's not for everyone.
Yeah,
So
I agree. What is the best piece of advice you could give to maybe a new or veteran homeschooling parent?
Okay.
From your perspective, what advice would you give?
Well, I would say like I said, constantly challenge your kids. That's one thing my mom has always done, and my dad, in our education, just to always work hard, and just not to scale back, not to hold back and say, oh, you don't have to do this. No, my mom was always like, you get it done. Even though it's hard, you push yourself to the limit, and then you see the reward from that. But also, I think that's extremely important. It also comes from the kid, wanting to work hard, but it starts with the parent, being a model, being an example. But one extremely important thing, too, is making learning fun. That's one thing I'm so thankful for. My mom has always made learning fun, whether it's learning through song, through CC has been really fun and rigorous. And
classical conversations.
Yeah, classical conversations has developed a love for learning and being silly, not going the traditional route of just, sometimes boring textbook, but instead doing things like going to a museum, or just different ways to make learning fun, so that later on, it's not like a chore. It's something that, you enjoy doing, and it's hard, but you see the benefits, and in the end, like, you're learning more than most kids in public school. I've seen that, and it's a blessing.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah,
I feel like that was so fabulous and so helpful. I feel like I've gleaned so much wisdom from you today, and I believe the audience has as well. So thank you for your time,
Of course.
Nina.
Thank you so much.
All right. Bye. We'll see you in the next one.